Out of all of the different film companies that exist out in the world, one of the ones that I will always put atop all of the rest in every regard has got to be Pixar. I can just never get enough of Pixar. Tailing way back to when the company first started, I didn't exist. But once I did, I quickly got introduced to all of Pixar's classic starters, and from a very early age, I knew that this was the company to follow. Now, Pixar's had a bit of an interesting career path, with them consistently staying on the upper edge of animation technology and achievement with each occurring title, and only ever really losing their game briefly through an over-reliance of sequels to their previous works. But with us now seeing the backside of both The Incredibles 2 and Toy Story 4, we now find ourselves in a whole new era of Pixar, going back to their original plan of releasing all sorts of, well, originals. So much so that we even have two entirely new originals both releasing in 2020, about 3 months apart. And that's great! The stories interwoven in many of Pixar's films are some of the greatest forms of storytelling ever graced onto cinema screens, in my opinion. But at the same time, I can't help but admit that I am a little hesitant with stepping into this next era of Pixar's. The two upcoming films deep in production are Pixar's Onward, telling the story of a fantastical world of magic and two brothers on a quest to revive their late dad beyond just the 2 legs they managed to succeed with so far. Whilst their second project, only just revealed with a teaser trailer about a week ago, follows the life and afterlife, or some kind of purgatory life, of Joe Gardner, living in the real world with a passion for music, who upon suffering an event that separates his soul, must venture into the soul world known as the U Seminar and work with other souls in training in order to return his body before it's too late. Now, both of these stories sound pretty intriguing and certainly original, and I can see a lot of potential for how both of them play out, which I'll discuss out fully later on. But between these two projects, I can sense a bit of a recurring theme that leaves me a little concerned, if not a little bit conflicted, especially for Soul. So let's talk about Soul. It's the more recent topic and the freshest one on everyone's minds, obviously. Now, something Pixar is doing for the first time within this film is introducing some IRL diversity, which somehow hadn't been done after all this time. Well, I guess that kind of makes sense considering most of the characters aren't exactly of the human variety until now. Still, this film is very much moving directions to focus on African American characters for their main cast, which for Pixar hasn't really been done previously other than with Coco and Mexico. Now, I feel when the teaser trailers first started, we all had very much the same reaction in most places. We all have a deeply riddled appreciation for Pixar movies, and we always expect the best of the best from them, and upon this opening, we very much expected yet another masterpiece of film. We're dropped into this photorealistic cityscape clearly inspired by New York City, and the tone of the film is already punctual in that brilliant piano track in the background. As we're introduced to our protagonist, we get an immediate connection to him through both the words he speaks, the designs he encapsulates, and the way he personifies himself, and as we settle into the groove of this music's theming and we hear the basic premise of what the character wants, a real chance to follow his musical passion, and the events are starting to open up in front of him, we start getting into it more, rooting for him and his classic adventure of following his dreams. And then we get our expected twist. Everything's lining up to be too good to be true, and we've yet to find our real crux of the film's plot. And then this happens. And our previously black, human, insertable character is transformed into this. Now, part of the Soul teaser made a specific point about highlighting that this came from the same studio that brought us Inside Out, Up, and Coco, 3 of Pixar's most emotional stories. And this was clearly an intentional point being made, as the creators of Coco aren't exactly the ones who are making Soul. The director of this film did, however, write and direct Up and Inside Out, as well as wrote all sorts of Pixar's other gems. Either way, this film is setting up to be one of real mature emotions, dealing with death, the existentialism of what to do with one's temporary time in life, and what truly matters in the world. However, while I do still feel that the story has a lot of potential to run with, I feel the studio has accidentally created a bit of a double meaning by including the Inside Out shout out here too, just because the character designs of the souls feels awfully samey to Inside Out, and I don't think that's a good thing, and I feel this on multiple levels. On the one hand, I feel I and a lot of other people are getting a little tired with that samey Pixar-y design. Part of the true charm that comes from Pixar's lineup of films is the intense diversity in style between each one. One day we're exploring the plastic realms of the toys in our bedroom, to switching it up to the furry armada of monsters in our bedroom. Sometimes we see humans in a nice looking form, and that can always translate well since it is simply reality with a little Pixar-y twang, and other times we're morphing into the fairy-like designs of the more abstract concepts of characters. And now that we're tackling diversity in a much more realer sense, to turn back into something more diluted down and similar to what we've seen before may still seem Pixar-y, but it loses something of the charm that comes with that labeling. And though we've only really seen it once before, and maybe the smallest hint of it also in Onwards, or is that just me, it gets tiring real quick. And that's not good. But also, and this is a pretty big point to mention here, this is the first time that Pixar has properly delved into making a film entirely focused on African American characters. It's an opportunity to show the world in a whole new perspective, with some interesting introductions of culture and representation to be shown. But then surely, no later than 20 minutes in, at most, the whole concept is tarnished for a more generic and broader type of character design. And I may be entirely wrong here, this film could still end up being a masterpiece of a film. I truly hope that it does, and there's plenty of ways that this problem can be worked around. Maybe the story has us constantly switching between the spectrum-y design of the soul world and the real world, either through him traversing through both of the realms somehow, or simply through an array of flashbacks of who each character was before their souls were separated, or how life is now that Joe Gardner's not conscious. But either way, for me, and a lot of other people who voiced their reactions to this trailer, things seem to fall rapidly downhill the moment Joe fell down that well. And that's a real shame, because this movie seems to have so many other elements going for it. The general theming and topics that will inevitably come up in this film point towards this film hosting a great array of real mature themes and emotion to keep kids entertained and adults crying in the cinemas. Not to mention, it worked as a nice duality against Pixar's other current project, Onwards, which seems to have the opposite approach of sticking to less mature themes, a generally more simple, family-friendly design to it, and somewhat feels less like an actual Pixar movie somehow. Though there's still complaints of the character designs being samey even there too. Odd. So I've been beating around the bush for a while now, let's actually dig into the potential of Soul next. I know I've been pretty negative and really hammering in my concerns with this whole Soul side of things, but looking at the simple themings and directions the story seems to be implying to be explored, sounds like the framework of what could genuinely be yet another one of Pixar's greatest hits. I mean, Coco surprised me, and I'm sure this one can too. So let me start off by describing the synopsis for what we do know that spreads a little bit further than just the contents that the teaser trailer showed us. So Joe Gardner is a middle school music teacher who has long dreamed of performing jazz music on stage, and finally gets a chance after impressing other jazz musicians during an opening act at the Half Note Club. However, an accident causes Gardner's soul to be separated from his body and transported to the U Seminar, a center in which souls develop and gain passions before being transported to a newborn child. And Gardner must work with souls in training, such as 22, a soul with a dim view on life after being trapped for years at the U Seminar, in order to return to Earth before it's too late. So yeah, quite a chunk to unpack there. One thing I do want to start on first is the constant theming with the afterlife shown both a little in this synopsis and all over the teaser trailer. For a start, the lighting in some of the shots we see here are awfully significant. Like in the one where he's rushing to reach his gig, he's pushing against the city crowd, specifically moving away from the light, potentially signifying his rejection of the afterlife to achieve his musical passion. Whilst once satisfied from the opportunity, he's walking directly towards it, like a foreshadowing of his coming fate. Or how's about the names of most of the businesses in the backgrounds being attached to musical terms? Groove, Move It, Cadence, and Ebel's Cafe, which sounds an awful lot lot like Treble's Cafe, if you ask me. And even the name of the club, the Half Note Club, being both a musical connection as well as the idea that this is only half of the story, with the other half being dipped in the world of the Soul Realm. Not to mention all of the connections to a new beginning of some kind, with the rising sun on the cityscapes to the spinning seeds falling from the tree, being the birth of new life, or the start of a new direction for our protagonist. But enough of simple symbolism, let's talk about the actual story. So obviously this is a tale about passion, with our protagonist having leaps and bounds of it, and our newbie soul 22 having seemingly none. The adventure will most likely cover the double arc of both Joe trying to return to his original body in time for the musical gig, and 22 trying to find some sort of passion in life in order to be born. Possibly against a time limit as well, after being placed here for so long, maybe, or something. Now, knowing how stories tend to go, and especially of the Pixar variety, it's likely that somewhere down the line, Joe Gardner's gonna somewhat learn that this gig opportunity is not what he truly wants, or at least is something he is willing to sacrifice for some greater good purpose. Which leads into the question, how will this film end? Well, to answer that, first we need to know, what's actually happened to Joe? Is he fully dead, or is it something more than that? Judging by the few pieces of information Pixar has given us, it seems that death is not the answer. The wording on the synopsis as an accident that separated his soul from his body simply seems to be so intentional that surely it's not death. Not to mention the cosmic world he actually finds himself in seems to be a kind of purgatory, the gap between life and death, as he lingers with non-living creatures who are in the transitional phase to becoming living creatures. So where is he? Well, the likeliest answer is yes, he's in a coma of some sort, or unconscious, or who knows, maybe he's walking around without a soul, lost without his passion like a living zombie in the real world. But I'm gonna go with coma for this sake. There's even a shot of a hospital doctor in this trailer which could allude to Joe's fate, with the barbers being what he wants and the hospital being what he gets. So with all those ideas coming together, Joe's in a coma, he'll likely sacrifice his passion for something bigger, 22 will likely find her passion, be it also piano, another instrument, actually dancing, or hey, it's probably singing, we've seen Tina Fey sing before, so it's probable, and a singer was missing from the jazz band earlier, and this is a story set up to be an emotional roller coaster. So perhaps there's a few ways that I can see this plot unfolding, and I'm gonna list them to you now. Number 1. Joe wakes up from the coma, abandons the gig, and supports 22's birth somewhat. It would be that the big emotional arc would be the actual beauty of childbirth, as much as that doesn't really sound like it would fit in a child's film, but you know, maybe it would. Number 2, Joe stays in the soul world, finding a passion to inspire others, and 22 is birthed through that. The emotional part here being that Joe chooses to actually stay dead in order to keep a bigger purpose of helping life progress forwards, finding the passion to actually be inspirational to others. Rather than playing music that inspires others, he does making life happen to inspire others. You know what I mean. To add more spice for this, in the third version of an ending I created, maybe 22's parents die and Joe ends up adopting 22 instead. 22 is birthed through his passion, and then he awakens from the coma and eventually adopts her. That sounds somewhat emotional, right? Number 4, Joe follows 22 into birth, becoming twins for the new mother, a whole new life. If Joe is in this transformative soul state, maybe he can continue the birthing process, though the fact that he's actually separated from his body suggests it's probably not going to happen. But it would be a twist you're not expecting. And number 5, the more generic ending to a story, Joe awakens from his coma and he manages to double dose both the gig for his own satisfaction and supporting the birth of 22 with her passion. Again, big emotional moment of playing his music and finally doing his passion, whilst 22 is given her own passion and gets to be born. How emotional. If any of these are the case, then there are a few extra tiny points that could come into effect here. Maybe that doctor isn't there for Joe's coma, but maybe she's there for a new mother-to-be instead. Or both. Maybe they're happening simultaneously in the same hotel. One is in a coma and one's being born, leading to the climax of the film. Of course, this is entirely speculation, especially considering we don't even know the full details of what's even going to be explored. But with the theme of finding what one is passionate about and the birth of new life, it very much seems like it's tackling directions similar to inspiration, inheriting said passion or whatever, and growing as a person through literal soul searching. Or it's all just based on that idea that listening to music in the womb helps with child development, so teaching music to a pre-born soul will help them develop passions ready for the real life. Maybe that is the nature of the whole soul realm. The poster already looks like a line of piano notes, and that one other image we do see somehow looks like it could be interactively musical. So maybe it all goes one in the same, with Joe's purpose being to assist the soul trainees. And expect all sorts of musical/life puns mashed together. Beats can also be called pulses, maybe it's gonna strike an emotional chord with us. The film's all about finding harmony with oneself, discovering the key to passion and life, working it out between characters with major and minor degrees of experience, pitching several ideas for passions, and finding a resolution despite the large or small scale of the scenario. Keeping their minds sharp and upbeat at every hurdle, looking for that perfect piece of soul music. Seriously, if this film doesn't use any of those terms, they're seriously missing out. I feel like that's like the whole theme of this movie. Now that's all well and good, and will be interesting to look back on in the summer to see just how far off I could have possibly missed the mark of what the film is hitting on, but let's go back to those issues that do still linger on with soul. The second realm that this film is likely to explore, as of right now, simply doesn't excite me, and I feel it's the same for many people. The realm may be new, but it has nothing gripping yet. The afterlife and abstract thoughts have already been explored in previous Pixar films, and from what we've seen so far, it's not been too impressive. The first location is simply a void with a collection of stars growing on one side like the heavenly light of the afterlife, and the only other part we see is this concrete-looking, slightly fantastical, stickery star floor. This image looks like it has a little bit more substance to it, but I'm uncertain if it can really win me over that well. The parts that truly have me invested in the film is what's happening in the real world, both before, after, and potentially during this soulful adventure. I want to know how the real world is affected. I want to see more of the real world counterparts of characters. The soul side of things simply seems generic at this point. Not to mention the introduction of 22 just seems to fall a little flat. The joke of dancing around isn't funny, and even if it's not meant to be, because Gardner clearly isn't impressed either, not only does that not make it any funnier, but it's also been done before. I don't remember exactly where, but this kind of exchange doesn't feel refreshing in the slightest. Someone making a fool of themselves and the other just watching unamused is generic, and a terrible way to introduce another main character in any kind of trailer for the first time. I'm not rooting for 22 right now, she seems almost annoying, and that unfunny, annoying comic relief character is not a good start to introduce us to this soulful world. Now that being said, this is still just a teaser trailer, and though I've already ragged on the soul designs, in a vacuum, I kinda like them. Or at least, I like the effect on them. Less of a fan of yet another blobby face design, but the kind of ethereal lighting spectrum on the outlines works great for them being souls, as if they're part of some visible spectrum that can't usually be observed without some kind of light-bending tool like a prism. But beyond all that, there's little really keeping me invested in the film's concept, or leaving me satisfied with where the film is detouring. I'd like to see the ending, and more of the real world if possible, but this whole other side of the world just doesn't grip me just yet. Be it through the world design, the character designs, the concept, or just the characters riddled inside of them, I'm unconvinced. Obviously, I'm still gonna watch this film, and I eagerly await to see another trailer to hopefully show off something with a bit more investing meat, but for now, I only hope that the beats I have seen are better than it seems, and that we really get to see more of that good stuff I've liked so far. And maybe a little direct into the beat of the music if we're lucky. I don't know. Pixar's soul leaves me a little concerned and conflicted. On one hand, this has the reach to really hit some emotional feels and really get us on this inspirational adventure. On the other hand, the spiritual world seems a little samey to previous Pixar lands and might fall into generic territory that leaves something to be desired. And it's all just poorly timed with the first prevalence of African American characters in the first 20 minutes, and possibly not again until the end of the film, beyond just voices. But I guess we'll just have to see. I'm really rooting for this film. I love Pixar, and I hope this blows it out of the water like I feel it really can. Only half a year to wait. For now, my name's been Dazz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. This is the first time I've done a trailer analysis in like years. I like it. Though, whose idea was it to release, like, so many other good movie trailers right now? The new Sonic the Hedgehog movie and Scooby Doo? I'll cover them another day. Maybe when they get second or third trailers or something. Maybe I can make this a trailer analysis series. I like that. That's a nice idea. Tell me your thoughts. I'm gonna watch it. I like the idea. I kinda don't like the other half of the idea. I'm twisted. I'm concerned. I'm conflicted. You get it. I'm a mess.